Marcus stepped out of his car and looked up at the grand hotel in front of him. It was a beautiful building, shining under the city lights, with large glass doors that reflected the busy streets outside. People walked in and out, some dressed in fancy suits, others carrying expensive luggage. It was exactly the kind of place where guests expected the best service, and Marcus knew it better than anyone else. What no one around him knew was that Marcus wasn't just another guest. He was the owner of this very hotel. He had worked for years to build a successful business, and this hotel was one of his proudest achievements. But instead of announcing who he was, he wanted to check in quietly, just like any regular customer. He wanted to see how his staff treated people when they didn't know they were being watched. Dressed in simple but stylish clothes, Marcus walked into the lobby with a confident but relaxed stride. The air inside was cool, filled with the soft sounds of gentle music playing in the background. The scent of fresh flowers and polished wood gave the place a luxurious feel. He noticed how the front desk staff smiled warmly at some guests, but barely acknowledged others. It was a small detail, but it told him a lot. Marcus stood in line at the reception, patiently waiting his turn. When he finally stepped forward, the receptionist barely looked up. She tapped her fingers on the desk, looking bored. "Yes?" she asked in a tone that lacked warmth. Marcus remained polite. "I have a reservation," he said, sliding his ID across the counter. The receptionist glanced at it quickly, typed something on her computer, and then gave a slow nod. "Okay," she said, printing his key card. There was no friendly welcome, no offer of help with his bags, just a cold, uninterested response. Marcus had seen enough hotels to know this was not the way top-class service worked. He took his key and walked to the elevators. As he waited, he observed everything around him. The way the bellboys rushed to help some guests while ignoring others. The way the front desk staff changed their tone depending on who was standing in front of them. These small moments revealed a lot about the hotel's culture. When Marcus reached his suite, he sat on the plush chair near the window, thinking. He had worked hard to create this business, to build a place where every guest felt valued and respected. But from what he had seen so far, something was wrong. His staff wasn't treating all customers with the same level of care. He decided to stay quiet for now and see how the rest of his visit played out. He wanted to be sure before making any big decisions. Little did the staff know, their actions in the next 24 hours would decide their future at the hotel. The next morning, Marcus woke up early, ready to explore more of the hotel and observe how the staff treated different guests. He got dressed in a simple but neat outfit and stepped out of his suite. As he walked down the hallway, he nodded at a housekeeping staff member who was cleaning a nearby room. The worker looked up, hesitated for a second, and then gave him a quick, unenthusiastic nod before going back to work. Marcus made his way to the lobby, where a small line had formed at the front desk. He decided to test something. Stepping into the queue, he waited patiently for his turn. In front of him, a well-dressed man approached the counter. The receptionist greeted him with a bright smile, speaking in a polite and cheerful tone. She asked if he needed anything, offered him recommendations for local restaurants, and made sure he was satisfied with his stay. Then it was Marcus's turn. He stepped forward, placing his room key on the counter. The receptionist's smile faded almost instantly. She didn't greet him the way she had greeted the previous guest. Instead, she simply asked, "What do you need?" in a flat tone. Marcus remained calm. "I'd like to ask about the late checkout policy," he said. The receptionist let out a small sigh, as if he were bothering her. "Checkout is at 11 a.m., she replied shortly. "Is there an option to extend it?" Marcus asked politely. She barely looked at him before answering. "Depends on availability." Marcus noticed how she didn't offer him the same level of service she had given the other guests just moments ago. There was no effort to make him feel welcome or valued. Instead, she acted as if she was in a hurry to get rid of him. Wanting to observe more, Marcus headed to the hotel lounge to grab some coffee. As he approached the counter, He noticed the barista greeting another guest warmly, asking how their morning was going. But when Marcus stepped up to order, the barista's expression changed. There was no friendly small talk, just a quick, "What can I get you?" Marcus placed his order and took a seat near the window, watching as hotel employees moved around. He saw how they treated some guests with extra care, offering assistance and recommendations. But others, like himself, were met with cold or indifferent behavior. A few minutes later, Marcus decided to test something else. He asked a passing hotel staff member for directions to the fitness center. The employee barely made eye contact and answered in the shortest way possible, pointing in a general direction before walking away. Marcus took a deep breath. He had seen enough to confirm his concerns. Some of his employees weren't treating guests fairly. They were making assumptions about people, deciding who deserved good service and who didn't. But what they didn't know was that Marcus wasn't just a guest. He was the owner. And soon, they were going to find out in a way they would never forget. Marcus decided to continue his quiet observation, determined to see if the treatment he had received earlier was just a mistake or a pattern in the hotel's service. He finished his coffee and made his way toward the lobby again, watching how the staff interacted with different guests. As he walked toward the elevators, he noticed a bellboy rushing to help a couple with their luggage. The bellboy smiled warmly, greeted them with enthusiasm, and even offered to carry their bags to their room. Marcus watched closely. The level of attention given to some guests was noticeably different from what he had experienced. Curious, Marcus decided to test the situation once more. He stood near the entrance of the hotel, where another bellboy was waiting. A moment later, a man in an expensive suit walked in. The bellboy immediately stepped forward with a bright smile. "Welcome, sir. Can I help you with your bags?" he asked cheerfully. A few moments later, Marcus stepped forward as if he were about to leave the hotel. He stood near the same bellboy, expecting the same level of service. But instead of being greeted, he was ignored. The bellboy looked in his direction, but quickly turned away, pretending not to notice him. Marcus stood there for a few more seconds, waiting to see if anyone would acknowledge him. No one did. Still calm, Marcus decided to take a short walk outside to clear his thoughts. As he stepped out of the hotel, he looked around at the bustling city. He took a deep breath, reminding himself why he had built this business in the first place. He had always wanted his hotels to be places where every guest felt valued, no matter who they were. But what he had seen so far told him that something was wrong with the way his employees were handling their jobs. As he turned to walk back inside, he noticed a security guard standing near the entrance. The guard glanced at him briefly, then looked again with a more serious expression. Marcus could tell that the guard was watching him closely, as if trying to figure out if he belonged there. A moment later, the guard stepped forward and asked, "Can I help you with something?" His tone wasn't welcoming. It was more like a question that suggested Marcus shouldn't be there. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "No, I'm just heading back to my room," he replied simply. The guard hesitated, looking him up and down. "Are you staying here?" he asked. Marcus remained calm but firm. "Yes, I am," he said, pulling out his room key and showing it. The guard gave a small nod, but there was no apology, no friendly response, just a brief glance before stepping back. Marcus walked inside without another word. He had seen enough. This wasn't just one mistake by a single employee. It was a bigger issue, and soon, the staff would realize just how serious their mistake had been. Marcus took the elevator back up to his suite, his mind racing with thoughts about everything he had experienced so far. He had spent years building a brand that stood for quality, respect, and fairness, yet here he was in his own hotel, being treated like an outsider. He had hoped that his staff would uphold the values he had built his business on, but what he had seen so far told a different story. Determined to see how far things would go, Marcus decided to test one final thing: how the staff handled special requests. He picked up the phone in his room and dialed the front desk. After a few rings, a staff member answered, sounding rushed. Front desk, the voice said quickly. Hello, Marcus said politely. I'd like to request a late checkout, if possible. The person on the other end let out a small sigh. Checkout is at 11 a.m., they replied. Yes, I understand, Marcus said patiently. But I was wondering if I could extend it for a couple of hours. There was a short silence before the voice answered. We don't have availability for late checkouts today. Marcus frowned. He had checked the hotel's online system just minutes ago, and it showed plenty of open rooms. Are you sure? He asked. I just checked, and it seems like there are several rooms available. The staff member hesitated. It's our policy, they finally said, their tone dismissive. Interesting, Marcus said. Thank you. And with that, he hung up. He sat for a moment, thinking. Just to confirm his suspicion, he decided to try something else. He used a different phone, his personal one, to call the front desk again. This time, he used a different tone, making himself sound more formal. Hello, he said when they picked up. I was wondering if late checkout is available for guests today. The staff member's tone immediately changed. Oh, absolutely, sir. We can extend checkout until 2 p.m. for a small fee, or complimentary for VIP guests. Would you like me to process that for you? Marcus smiled slightly. No, that won't be necessary, he said, then ended the call. Now he had all the proof he needed. The staff wasn't treating guests equally. They were making judgments based on their own assumptions, deciding who deserved better service and who didn't. And the worst part, they had no idea they were doing this to the very person who had built the hotel. Determined, Marcus stood up and grabbed his key card. It was time to check out. But he wasn't leaving quietly. As he made his way back to the lobby, he saw the same receptionist who had spoken to him rudely earlier. He walked up to the desk, placed his key card down, and said calmly, I'm checking out. The receptionist barely looked at him as she tapped on her computer. Room number? She asked, not even trying to sound polite. Marcus gave her the number. All right, you're all set, she said, handing him his receipt without another word. Marcus didn't say anything either. He simply took the receipt, stepped back, and waited. Because in just a few moments, the entire staff was about to learn exactly who they had been dealing with. Marcus took a deep breath and looked around the lobby. He had checked out of his room, but he wasn't leaving just yet. It was time to reveal the truth. He walked over to a seating area near the front desk and pulled out his phone. With a few taps, he sent a message to the hotel's general manager, asking him to meet in the lobby immediately. Then he sat back and waited. A few minutes later, the general manager, a tall man in a navy blue suit, hurried into the lobby. He looked around, confused, searching for the person who had messaged him. His eyes passed over Marcus at first, but when Marcus stood up and stepped forward, the manager frowned slightly, as if trying to place his face. Good morning, sir. Can I help you? The manager asked politely. Marcus gave a small nod. Yes, I think we need to have a conversation about your staff. The manager raised an eyebrow. Is there a problem? Before Marcus could answer, the receptionist from earlier noticed them and quickly stepped in. Oh, sir, is everything all right? She asked the manager, completely ignoring Marcus. Marcus watched as she suddenly became polite and professional, something she had not done for him earlier. He let a small pause fill the air before he spoke. You don't recognize me, do you? He asked, looking directly at her. The receptionist looked confused. Should I? She asked hesitantly. Marcus turned back to the general manager. You don't recognize me either. The manager squinted slightly, as if trying to remember. Then, slowly, his eyes widened. He had seen Marcus before, not as a guest, but in company emails, in business meetings. Suddenly, his entire expression changed. Wait a minute, the manager said, his voice almost a whisper. You're Mr. Marcus, the owner. The receptionist's face turned pale. The front desk staff nearby looked up in shock. Conversations in the lobby slowed as people sensed something important was happening. "Yes," Marcus said calmly. "I am the owner of this hotel, and for the past 2 days, I have been staying here, watching, listening, and experiencing how your staff treats guests." A heavy silence filled the air. Marcus continued, his voice steady but firm. "I was ignored at the front desk. I was treated with disrespect by multiple employees. I was denied a late checkout when others were given one without question. I was even watched suspiciously by security, as if I didn't belong in my own hotel." The manager swallowed hard. "Sir, Marcus held up a hand. "I'm not finished." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried power, making everyone listen. "Hotels are built on service. Every guest should be treated with respect, no matter who they are. But what I saw here, it tells me that my staff is not living up to the values of this company." The receptionist looked like she wanted to disappear. Some of the nearby employees were staring at the floor, avoiding his gaze. Marcus let the silence sit for a moment before speaking again. "Tell me, is this how all guests are treated, or just the ones your staff assumes aren't important?" The manager shook his head quickly. "No, sir, this is unacceptable. I sincerely apologize. This should never have happened." Marcus nodded slightly. "You're right. It shouldn't have." He turned to the receptionist. "And you, how many other guests have you treated this way?" The receptionist opened her mouth, then closed it again, clearly at a loss for words. Marcus sighed. "I built this business to be a place where every guest feels valued, but right now, I don't see that happening." He looked at the manager. "We need to fix this. Immediately." The manager nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. I'll call an emergency meeting right away." Marcus glanced around the lobby one last time. He had come here expecting professionalism and fairness. Instead, he had found something disappointing. But now, things were about to change. Within minutes, the entire hotel staff was gathered in the conference room. The atmosphere was tense. Employees whispered among themselves, exchanging nervous glances. Some had already realized the truth, while others were still confused about why they had been called so suddenly. Marcus stood at the front of the room, his arms crossed, watching as everyone settled in. The general manager stood beside him, looking uneasy. Once the room was silent, Marcus took a step forward and spoke. "I'm sure many of you are wondering why you're here," he began, his voice calm but firm. "Let me make it clear. This meeting is happening because I have seen something in this hotel that I am deeply disappointed by." The staff shifted uncomfortably. Some looked down, avoiding his gaze. "For the past 2 days, I have been staying in this hotel, not as the owner, but as a regular guest. I did this because I wanted to see how my employees treat customers when they think no one important is watching." A few employees glanced at each other in shock. The receptionist from earlier looked like she wanted to disappear. "What I experienced," Marcus continued, "was not the level of service I expect from my staff. I was ignored at the front desk. I was treated differently than other guests. I was denied services that were freely offered to others. And worst of all, I was made to feel like I didn't belong in my own hotel." Murmurs spread across the room. Some employees looked horrified, while others seemed guilty. Marcus let the silence sit for a moment before he continued. "This is not about me. This is about every guest who has walked into this hotel expecting good service and was treated unfairly instead. This is about the reputation of this business, my business, that I worked hard to build. And right now, I am not happy with what I have seen." The general manager cleared his throat. "Mr. Marcus, I want to personally apologize for." Marcus held up a hand to stop him. "This isn't about apologies. It's about change." The room fell silent again. "I built this company with one goal, to provide excellent service to every guest, no matter who they are. That means every person who walks through those doors deserves the same level of respect and care. And yet, I saw clear signs that some of you pick and choose who you treat with kindness and who you ignore. The receptionist, the bellboys, and the front desk staff all looked visibly uncomfortable. Marcus took a deep breath. This is going to change today. From now on, every employee will go through retraining. Customer service training will be mandatory, and anyone who refuses to follow the standards of this hotel will not work here anymore. The room was dead silent. No one dared to speak. Marcus continued, "If you are here just for a paycheck and don't care about treating guests with respect, then you are in the wrong place. I am not running a business that allows discrimination, disrespect, or bad service. Every guest matters. Every guest deserves respect. And if you cannot follow that simple rule, you will not be working here." A few employees nodded in agreement, while others swallowed hard. Marcus turned to the general manager. "Effective immediately, we will start reviewing every staff member's performance. If we find any more cases of poor service, action will be taken." The manager nodded quickly. "Understood, sir." Marcus looked back at the employees. "I want this hotel to be the best. I want guests to leave feeling welcomed and valued. That can only happen if every single one of you does your job the right way." He let his words settle in before finishing. "I believe in this hotel. I believe in good service. Now, I need to know if I can believe in my staff." With that, he walked out of the room, leaving the employees to think about what had just happened. After Marcus left the conference room, the employees sat in stunned silence. No one had expected the owner himself to test them, and now their jobs were on the line. Some were nervous, others ashamed, and a few were determined to prove themselves. The general manager cleared his throat. "All right, everyone," he said, trying to regain control of the room. "You heard Mr. Marcus. Things are going to change, and they're going to change now." He looked directly at the receptionist, the bellboys, and the security guard. "I need each of you to think about how you treated Mr. Marcus, and more importantly, how you treat every guest who walks into this hotel." The receptionist swallowed hard. I didn't know who he was," she said quietly. The manager's expression hardened. "That's the problem. You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with respect. Every guest is important." The security guard nodded slowly. "I understand. I should have been more professional." The bellboy looked guilty. "I just followed what I saw others doing," he admitted. "I didn't think about how wrong it was." The manager sighed. "That needs to change. Starting now, we are implementing mandatory customer service training for everyone. And I mean everyone. Front desk, security, housekeeping, restaurant staff, everyone." The employees nodded, some looking relieved at the chance to improve. A few hours later, the training began. Marcus had already arranged for professional customer service trainers to come in and work with the staff. The first lesson was simple but powerful. Treat every guest with kindness and respect, no matter what. During the training, the employees watched real examples of excellent service and compared them to mistakes they had made. The receptionist realized how cold and unwelcoming she had been. The bellboy understood how small actions, like ignoring certain guests, could create a negative experience. The security guard saw how his body language and tone could make guests feel uncomfortable. One exercise was particularly eye-opening. The trainer had employees take turns pretending to be guests while others played the role of hotel staff. The receptionist, now in the guest position, felt what it was like to be ignored. The security guard experienced how uncomfortable it was to be questioned unnecessarily. And the bellboy saw how frustrating it was when no one offered to help with luggage. By the end of the first training session, the mood in the hotel had changed. Employees were starting to understand the impact of their actions. Meanwhile, Marcus quietly observed from a distance. He saw the staff putting effort into learning and improving. He knew change wouldn't happen overnight, but this was a start. Later that evening, he called a meeting with the general manager. "How is the staff responding to the training?" Marcus asked. The manager nodded. There's definitely a shift. Some of them seem truly sorry for how they behaved. Others are realizing they need to do better. Marcus thought for a moment. Good. Keep pushing them. And from now on, I want regular guest satisfaction reports. I want to know if service is improving. The manager made a note. Understood, sir. Marcus stood up. I'll be leaving tomorrow, but I will be back. And when I return, I expect to see a hotel that treats every guest the right way. The manager gave a firm nod. We won't disappoint you again. Marcus walked out of the office, feeling hopeful. Today had been a tough lesson for the staff, but it was a necessary one. Now, it was up to them to prove that they had truly learned from it. The next morning, Marcus packed his bags and prepared to leave the hotel. As he stepped out of his suite, he noticed something different in the hallway. A housekeeping staff member who had barely acknowledged him before now greeted him with a warm smile. "Good morning, sir. I hope you had a wonderful stay," she said politely. Marcus nodded. "Thank you. I appreciate that." As he walked toward the elevator, he saw the bellboy who had ignored him on his first day. This time, the young man quickly stepped forward. "Sir, may I help you with your luggage?" he asked with genuine enthusiasm. Marcus handed him his bag. "Thank you. That would be great." When he arrived at the lobby, the receptionist, who had once dismissed him, stood up straight as soon as she saw him. There was a nervous look in her eyes, but she spoke respectfully. "Mr. Marcus, I want to personally apologize for how I treated you before. I didn't realize how my actions could affect guests. I am truly sorry." Marcus studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I appreciate your apology. What's more important is that you've learned from this." "I have," she said sincerely. "I will do better." Just then, the general manager walked up. "Sir, may I have a moment before you go?" Marcus followed him to a private lounge area. The manager looked determined. "After yesterday's meeting, the entire staff stayed late for extra training," he explained. "Everyone has committed to making changes, and we've already started implementing new policies. We've also introduced a guest feedback system to track our progress." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That's good to hear. But words mean nothing without action. I will be watching." The manager nodded. "We understand, and we won't let you down." Marcus glanced around the hotel lobby. There was a noticeable shift in the energy. Employees were more attentive. Guests looked happier. It was a small change, but it was a step in the right direction. As he headed toward the exit, the security guard who had once watched him suspiciously now gave him a respectful nod. "Safe travels, sir." Marcus paused, then smiled. "Thank you." The bellboy held the door open for him, and as Marcus stepped outside, he felt a sense of satisfaction. This was more than just a hotel. It was a place he had built with hard work and dedication, and now it was on the path to becoming what he had always intended it to be, a place where every guest felt valued, no matter who they were. As he got into his car, he knew he would return, and when he did, he expected nothing less than excellence. Because in his hotel, respect and good service were not optional. They were the foundation of everything.